Good evening, everybody. Welcome to a Broadland District Council's Cabinet meeting. This is a public meeting and it is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. And I think we're on, are we? Yes. Yes. Thank you very much. Right, so first things first, I do have an update for you. It's just a brief notice I'm going to give. You'll see that it will be coming to Council in a different format, but just so that Cabinet's aware, it's further to Cabinet's decision in January 2023 to enter into a joint venture to deliver a programme of mitigation for nutrient neutrality. Cabinet is advised that Anglian Water has subsequently withdrawn from Norfolk Environmental Credits, but the ongoing relationship between Anglian Water and NEC will be enshrined in a new Memorandum of Understanding. Furthermore, Cabinet is advised that approval of the Council's shareholder representative on the member board of the NEC and the director appointment to the board will be included in the Monitoring Officer's report to Council later this month. Okay? So if I then move on to our first item, which is declarations of interest. Does anybody have anything to declare? Thank you. Apologies for absence.
There's no apologies for that.
Thank you very much. So, minutes of the meeting. On page 7, you will find the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of November. Does anybody have any comments they want to make about those or any issues to do with accuracy? No? Okay, thank you very much. So we can take that as agreed then. We'd all just go cheers. Thank you. Lovely. Public speaking. Do we have any members of the public? No? Thank you very much. Okay, so if I move on to item 5, overview and scrutiny.
Thank you. Positive meeting last week. I felt we had a unanimous agreement on all the items. So good discussion around the Cabinet report, the report on the Strategic Performance Risk Finance report, which no doubt you're going to get in a moment. I think members asked some good questions, asking particularly about certain reasons for red and amber. I made the point, and I think others did too, that another man's amber could be another man's green because you can be a victim of your own success when, for example, in the help, with regards to the Help Hub, that it's dealing with a higher number of people. Well, that makes it an amber rating and its performance is considered to be going down. But actually, I said that could be argued that it's a success of the Help Hub, that it's helping more people. So, but that was, we had the largest amount of discussion around that item, and I think members on that committee asked some good questions, which were well answered. Thank you. The only other thing I think which we were all pleased with was the hybrid mail contract and the potential savings that would bring forward going into the long term. So all matters were supported right across the chamber by both sides, and that's all I have to say. Unless you've got any other further questions.
Lovely, thank you very much. No, that's great, thanks. Okay, so in that case, representations from non-Cabinet members. In that case, can I move us on to the Strategic Performance, Risk and Finance Report for Quarter 2, 23-24, which you will find on page 13.
Thank you, Chair. So the report in front of you gives an overview of the Council's Quarter 2 position for Strategic Performance, Risk and Finance. I'm just going to highlight a few key points in the finance section before handing over to Corinne, who's going to look at the strategic performance and risk elements of the report. So as at the end of September, BDC is facing a number of inflationary and demand pressures. Overall, there is a total pressure of £575,000 on the cost of core services, and action will be taken across the directorates and service areas to try and reduce this overall cost pressure over the remaining part of the financial year. The pressures are offset by buoyant investment income due to the fact that we've got higher cash balances at BDC at the moment, and interest rates for our investments are a lot higher than we were anticipating at this time. Also at the end of the period, BDC has spent 7.4 million on capital schemes, and the forecast for the end of the year is that we'll expend 11.3 million on the capital programme. And the report further analyses the variances from each service area further down in the appendices. So any questions on that section or areas of the report?
Thank you. Steve, would you like to have anything to add to the report before we all pile in?
No, just the key point that was just mentioned just now, in terms of budgetary pressures that are upon us. There is also, of course, a capital issue which we're also currently engaged in terms of the reserves being allocated, all those reserves being allocated for capital. So it's something we need to pay attention to as well. And the officers and Rodney and myself are working pretty hard at the moment around this budget and where we're going, and to also offset all these pressures that we have incurred and inherited at the moment, largely due to inflation, staff pay rise, a number of things actually have impacted us. I think that's about it really. Yeah. Report's pretty extensive.
Yes, it is a very comprehensive report, so thank you very much for that. I think we're aware that there are all sorts of pressures on us, aren't they? Inflationary pressures, I think, are allegedly slightly diminishing, but of course that may also have the impact of reducing interest rates, of course, which would the corollary to that then is that our investment income goes down as well. So obviously it's getting that balance right, isn't it, I suppose? Okay, so does anybody else have any questions?
I did actually point out, Chair, that the revenue from planning fees is substantially lower than budgeted for, and this is potentially an embarrassment. We're not even halfway through the year yet as in reporting terms, and all right, okay, there's a phrase in there indicating that it may not be as bad as currently is indicating, but you know, when you get new developers actually shutting their gates currently within the district, it is actually not a good sign out there that the building trade is in actually good fettle. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you. I think that we're all aware that part of that, I think, is down to nutrient neutrality issues. I think also, am I right in thinking that I've been told the planning fees has been agreed to be raised by the government? I'm not sure how far towards remedying some of our losses or costs that will help with. I don't know. Does anybody have a likely answer to that?
The Chair, the planning fees are going up this month in accordance with government dictate, and it will mitigate some of the loss of income, but it will not offset it totally by any manner of means.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to comment on the food waste costs, because there was a comment, there was a question at scrutiny around the transfer from the waste reserve to cover those costs, and that goes back to in the previous administration when we were looking at rolling out food waste, and obviously having to cover that cost because we were ahead of the curve in terms of being able to roll it out, but on the basis that we may recoup that cost through a government, central government funding. And as we know, many of the initiatives in terms of rolling out waste and recycling have now been delayed, and so we're not at the present time able to say for certain whether we'll be able to recoup those costs, but still hopeful.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? No? I'm sorry, Corinne. I was so interested in the finances, I entirely forgot about the risk. I think I strayed into risk unexpectedly as well. So, yes, do go on.
Thank you, Chair. So, as Darren mentioned earlier, that this is our Q2 performance, so the performance and risk position at the end of September. So you can see that most of our indicators are green. So we have 18 green indicators, 6 amber and 2 red. The majority of our indicators are moving in a positive direction, so we've got 15 improving in terms of their direction of travel, against only 8 declining. We continue to perform well in a number of measures, so for example, collection of business rates continues to perform well, low levels of staff sickness, but also the range of planning measures related to decisions taken within statutory timescales continue to exceed targets. We've got 2 red measures this quarter, relating to staff retention, so that's sitting at 7.9%, and that's set to miss its end of year target. You can see in the report that we've got a range of interventions in place to bring that measure back on track, and that relates to onboarding support, career development pathways, and comprehensive manager training. But also to note that we have a tight labour market, retention rates are a national issue, and we are seeing some influence on that in this indicator here. The second red measure relates to consolidated demand on housing. So you'll see from the report we're seeing an increase in demand for support against the backdrop of sort of limited housing availability, and that's having an impact on the performance of that measure. And on to risks. We have no new risks or significant increases in the severity score in our risk profile at the end of this quarter. You can see on page 25 of the report we are proposing 3 risks to be de-escalated due to mitigating actions which have now reduced that severity score. And you can also see on page 66 of the report 2 changes that relate to those risk mitigations. Open the floor to questions. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much. Anybody, questions or comments you wish to make?
Just in terms of the homeless situation as well, of course we do have on the horizon, nothing to do with this building, but the LHF funding and 3 potential properties there to alleviate the homelessness situation, and also the costs on the council, of course. So we're doing 2 things. One, help to alleviate it and the increased need that especially my fellow portfolio holder, Councillor Hartley, is well aware of, but also to make sure that we can find that's financially sustainable for the council as well. So a hard job, and we're working on both those tracks. Sure.
Okay, thank you. And I think we all know that there's considerable concern across most district councils about the problems with homelessness and the difficulty of getting housing that people can actually afford to rent or live in. I don't think this is just Broadland, but I think we are managing it to the best of our ability. And I have actually signed up to various letters acknowledging the risks and the problems that local councils face in this respect. So one would hope that somebody listens at some point. Anybody else got any comments?
Well, it's perhaps reflecting partly on what Councillor Starling was saying earlier on in terms of what we're measuring on some of these, and when we're looking at usage of the Help Hub, in many ways it's absolutely no celebration, and more people are having to turn to our Help Hub than we had projected and had done in previous years. In some ways it's a sign of success. We're a victim of our success in more people accessing it, but it's also indicative of the amount of need that is out there as well. And certainly I'm not going to be, trumpeting if we're, this figure goes as high as 4,000 in a year, because it's not something that you want us to be helping people, but you don't want that level of need in the community. Yeah. I think what I've reflected to the officers, and perhaps we look at in terms of future measures, is we look at what outcomes we're getting, and because what we want to see as councillors is that people are contacting our Help Hub, that we're actually assisting them to have positive outcomes, and then we don't need them within the service and accessing the hub in the future. So perhaps in the future we perhaps need to look a little bit more nuanced approach at this type of measure, that we don't just look at bare numbers, that we look at the outcomes that we're getting for people. But certainly, for the 4 people who are watching on YouTube, certainly if you do know of anybody here who is in need in Broadland at the current time, we would absolutely encourage them to be contacting our Help Hub.
Yes, I wholeheartedly concur. I think the only thing is, I think the reason we're doing numbers here really is because it is the financial report. So, you are going to get lots of numbers the nature of the beast, really. But there are, you're right, there are other ways that we should be looking to offer support, and I think the government's funding has increased recently to bring it up to that 30%, which is something that we were all lobbying for, so that is helpful. But it's not a situation we want anybody to be finding themselves in when they need this sort of help, really. But thank you for that. Does anybody else wish to comment on anything?
Thank you, Chair. Just to agree, I think the broader point here is that Broadland is a relatively affluent area, and if our residents are having problems and needing to call help hubs and the homelessness situation is rising here, I think it's indicative of a wider problem throughout the whole country, and it does need much more support and direction from central government. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we are okay moving on. We all note that report. I think that's where we're sitting. If I do you want me to read the recommendation? I can't even say it. Recommendations. It's one of those evenings, isn't it? I think I'm a bit too long. So we're endorsing the revenue and capital position for Q2. We're endorsing the Q2 performance, and we are endorsing the current position with respects to risks, and agree the actions to support the risk mitigation, which Corinne has just outlined for us. And we also endorse the updates to the delivery plan for the mid-year, which obviously are in that appendix. So we're all happy with those things? Yes, good. Thank you very much. In that case, I take us to item 8, which is the Council Tax Assistance Scheme. I think that's Lindsay.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm here today with a paper for the Council Tax Assistance Scheme. Just to give a bit of background for those who are unfamiliar, the Council Tax Assistance Scheme replaced Council Tax Benefit in 2013, and since that year, local authorities have had the ability to shape their own scheme how they see fit to help their residents in the best way. The scheme is required to be reviewed by officers and agreed by Council each year. A couple of years ago, in 2021, we undertook a full-scale review of our scheme, and we made a number of changes to make sure that it was still legally compliant, that it was efficient to process for our officers, and that it was fair and directed support to those most in need, and obviously helped work pay as well for those who were moving into work. We've also made some changes in recent years to take into account the increased numbers of universal credit customers. That has been rising at an exponential rate, but luckily we have future-proofed our scheme to make sure that those customers are taken into account and treated as fairly as other customers. The new scheme has now been in place for a full financial year, which has allowed us to undertake an analysis of how effective that has been. We've commissioned a report from an external company, and the report has come back, and luckily it's showing that the scheme is effective, it is value for money for the council, and it is delivering the support to our customers as we wanted it to do. So it is absolutely delivering on the aims that we set out a couple of years ago. Due to this and the fact that there has been no legislative changes, no major legislative changes this year, we are proposing that there are no changes to the scheme for the next financial year. I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Anybody any questions or anything you wish to add to that?
To break the silence, I think it's a very sensible way forward. At the moment, this is a holding position, and it's one which I'm more than content to endorse.
Yeah, I think just to make it clear that you have to do a consultation if you want to change it anyway, is that right? Yeah. So obviously there isn't time to do that, so this is perfectly reasonable, and I'm guessing if you feel that we need to do a reconsultation or make any changes, that's what we're going to do next year, is what you're saying, isn't it, really?
Yes, absolutely. If we were to make any changes, ideally we would like to take the whole financial year prior to the year that we wish to make the changes to make sure we fully model it, consult from the public. So yes, if we do wish to do that, we'd like to start that work in about March, April time next year.
Okay, that's fine. I'm sure we're all very happy to hear that, and it works. And so, you know, I think for me, I think the most distressing thing is that you see people in work needing council tax assistance, which is a bit of a shame, but there you are. Not their problem. But, okay, so are we all happy to accept those that report, and we'll approve that scheme? Yep. Thank you very much. Oh, Lindsay, you were saying for the next one as well. How lovely. Thank you. Would you like to move on to item 9?
Thank you. Yes, so the next paper I have is regarding our discretionary housing payment policies and council tax discretionary relief policy. These are, as the name implies, are discretionary pots of money that sit alongside our means tested benefit, housing benefit and council tax assistance. We have reviewed them to ensure that they are still fit for purpose and they're delivering on what we'd like to achieve. Discretionary housing payment, that's a pot of money which is externally funded, and we don't have any control over how much money we actually receive from the DWP for that. We did have a peak of money in 2020, as you would imagine. That has now since decreased quite significantly. However, the demand that we're getting for the DHP payments has roughly stayed the same. So we wanted to review the policy to make sure it is as effective as it can be and that it's nicely tightened up. The increase is due to a number of reasons: welfare reforms, the increase in the cost of living, that people generally have less spare cash to meet that gap between their housing benefit and what their rent actually is. So we've reviewed the policy and the decision matrix to ensure that the spend continues to be fair and that it is directed to the customers where it will be most effective, where it will actually help them solve the problem that they are in. We'd like to also point out that discretionary housing payment, because the money is less than it was, we have put in the policy that we will work with our colleagues in the rest of People and Communities, the Help Hub, to make sure that any alternative solutions that aren't monetary based can be sought as well, that we can't just fix things with a pot of money, can't be used as a sticking plaster anymore. We have to make a sort of a wider solution for our customers, so that we need to make sure our officers take that into account, so that's in there as well. The major change that we've made to the DHP policy is due to the fact that we're seeing an increase in demand from housing associations for rent in advance for customers. If we were to help every customer who needed this, the fund simply wouldn't be enough. So we need to put something in there to say that we won't pay this as a matter of policy. We will, as I say, seek alternative solutions with our colleagues to see if there's something else we can do for the customers, and we will also work with the landlords as well to see if there's anything they can do, payment plans, things like that. It's not typically, historically, it's not been something that's done by housing associations, but we're seeing an increase due to the financial pressures that they're under as well. So we do appreciate why they're doing it, but we need to work with them and with our colleagues to seek an alternative solution and not just use DHP as a pot of money. But because it is a discretionary scheme, the point is it's there to help people who don't fall into the normal criteria. So we do have an exceptional circumstances line in there to make sure that anyone who really does need help, we still have the ability to do so if we see fit. So that's the discretionary housing payment policy. The council tax discretionary relief policy is internally funded. It is a much smaller pot of money. However, luckily, we're not seeing an increase in demand for that pot of money. Certainly nothing along in the same way that we're seeing with the DHP policy. The discretionary housing payment claims. Therefore, there's no material change to the CTDR policy. We're quite happy with it as it is. As I say, it's just been tightened up. We like to think that this is because the council tax assistance scheme itself is actually delivering what we need it to. Therefore, the extra pot of money isn't needed to be drawn on as much as we might imagine it would in the cost of living crisis. So we're quite happy with that one going as it is. So again, happy to take any questions.
It's interesting because you actually answered one of the questions I was going to ask you. But I will just restate it. I was surprised to discover that the housing associations now want advance rent, because that's not something that's ever been done in the past, is it? And I guess even though their rents are lower than the private rented accommodation, it's still a problem for people trying to find that in advance. So, and if I'm right, what you're trying to say is that we're not saying we won't help them, but what we are allowing ourselves the option to investigate other ways of doing that. I guess if we said we weren't going to help, I don't know quite where that would leave us with the housing associations either. So, yeah.
So it tends it tends to be the newer housing associations. So the old legacy ones like Clarion, Flagships, less and less do it. Flagship do occasionally as well, don't they? But it tends to be the newer ones which are coming onto the market. They're normally from private equity funds and they're backed in that way. So their policy is they have to have a payment up front. The allocations policy is important here, and the SLA with the housing associations, because we have to detail within there that they can't do it. We will look to assist at times, but the argument I normally say, because their point is, well, we need to make sure their tenancies are sustainable, which we fully support that. However, us just paying a whack of money up front, meaning that we can't help someone who's potentially facing eviction later on, isn't a way of helping them overall. If they do want to do this, say to the resident, can you start paying £3-4 extra a week on top of your rent, so your rent account goes into credit over a period of time, and that's the way we try and help them more and more. But I just don't want you to think it is the likes of Clarion are taking the mick, etc. It's more the newer ones which are coming in, and other ones are trying to follow suit, and we're being robust in our pushback on that.
Thank you. That is really helpful, because I was worried that they were all going down that road. So that's very useful to know. So thank you for that. Does anybody else have any questions they'd like to ask on this topic?
Yeah, just to clarify on the smaller pot that is available, the criteria on that, I recall going back some time, was revisited some time ago. And do you, in terms of your team, think there is any need to perhaps revisit that criteria? I hear that you're saying the demand there doesn't seem to be any greater than what it was. So just wondering if you believe that's anything to do with the criteria, or that's just where the demand is. It's not as a result of perhaps criteria needing to be re-looked at. So just clarify that, please.
Actually, we're quite happy that the criteria is fairly open, and it is deliberately done that way to make sure that anybody who needs the extra help, basically we can help them. If we feel that with every claim we would look at their income and outgoings and see if there's anything else that could be done. But if they need the extra help, the criteria is open enough that we can help them. And that is, as designed by law, there is a piece of legislation that says we have to have a pot of money for anybody who needs extra help with it. So no, it's not a restrictive criteria at all. In fact, it is quite the opposite.
It's just for my own clarification, really, and just interested in the trends in terms of rent in advance for private landlords, and whether we're seeing whether there's been a peak and then it's kind of dropping down again, and what can we actually do in terms of negotiation, is it, between the parties? How do we manage that?
So the rent in advance for private landlords is outside this piece of work, because discretionary housing, it's okay, I can cover the questions quite happily. We have a separate pot for, and we work with credit union on that. The problem we're seeing actually is the opposite. We're not getting through the money simply because people can't get access to the private rental properties in the first place. Because if they're not affordable, then part of the assessment of whether we will provide them with some rent in advance and a deposit is the property going to be affordable longer term. But if there isn't any affordable private rental properties out there, we can't utilise the pot of money to be able to give them rent in advance. So we will always negotiate with landlords. The key problem is, just to repeat myself, is if a monthly rent isn't affordable to them, there's no landlord to be able to negotiate with at present. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just want to say I think this is a very common sense approach, and just want to thank the team for all the work you've done on this, and it's really important that we continue to support the most vulnerable people in our society. So I applaud all your work. Thank you.
Okay, so basically we are recommending to council therefore that these proposals and approve the discretionary housing payment and the council tax discretionary relief policies for implementation in April 2024. Is that okay? Yes, good, lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you both. Lovely. So we move on to item 10, which is the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, People and Skills. So that's Deborah, and I'm looking forward to this one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. So when the council submitted our investment plan and it was approved by DLUC last summer, we did include high-level information about how we would like to support people and skills moving forward. At the time, we were only allowed to spend money on the people and skills interventions in the final year of the programme, so starting in April 2024. This has been changed. We can use any funds this year for that purpose if we wish to start things up and running. So the paper in front of you outlines 3 key work streams that we would like to support our residents. So the first one is those furthest from the jobs market. We would like to work with voluntary and community sector organisations to get funding out there for employability and confidence support. So the funding we would like to use would be for training opportunities, for softer skills, for vocational licences, basically as needed for pilot programmes coming forward. The middle programme is for apprenticeship support, so this is funding working in partnership with Apprenticeship Norfolk to get funding out directly to businesses for them to be able to take on apprentices where they wouldn't necessarily be able to, but also directly to the apprentices through the organisation that they're employed by for things like travel or equipment costs that they might be a barrier to employment. The final part of the project is for the longer term legacy. So this is connecting up industry with education to work for the future, to make sure that the education providers are providing the right education for the work we need, or the workforce we need moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, obviously all 3 of these are very important, but I think probably the most important from our point of view is the third one, because there is such a shortage in the skill base for retrofit and the construction industry. So building that hub, I think, is absolutely vital, because we've got so much work to do, and there is just not the people there to do it. So this is a start on getting that going, and it's obviously extremely good use of the money.
Yes, excuse me. Yes, I'd like to reinforce that. I think just to feedback on conversations we've had with businesses in the construction sector, and I had a very interesting long conversation around the needs of a particular building firm in the retrofit sector, and just how inappropriate some of the courses are at the moment. So that's an issue in terms of being able to work with the establishments providing the training. But just the support to be able to then have the skills to be able to roll out any kind of retrofit program that we might be funding in future. Clearly it's needed, but you need the people as well as the funding to be able to roll it out. So it's good to see this very much supported. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I would absolutely concur with that. I think for me what's interesting is the fact that there are skills that we need now that we don't have and that we don't seem to be providing an education for. So if we can go some way to using this money to help get those sorts of skills training set up, that would be a really good thing. It'd be great if we could do something like have our own little skills hub of some sort that, you know, where we did run training courses, and which we do for some things, but these are particularly specific building things, aren't they? And I think absolutely, we all know trying to get people to do tradespeople's jobs is quite difficult because they're very short supply. So I think anything like that it is a good way of pushing this money forward. So I'm very keen on it. And of course, people having the ability to get a job is another way of limiting or reducing some of the impact of some of the other things we've been looking at tonight, like the discretionary housing schemes and council tax allowance and so on. So, you know, I do think skills is really important. So I, for one, am very supportive of this measure. So thank you very much. And I think I can speak for all of us that we're quite keen to see this get going. So unless anybody's got any other questions, no? Should I move us on then to we are going to approve the proposals for using the UKSPF allocations, the UK Prosperity Fund money, allocations under people and skills interventions by designing a bespoke apprenticeship incentivisation scheme for Broadland to be delivered by Apprenticeships Norfolk, by providing grants of up to 25,000 for pilot employability and confidence building projects, and for procurement to develop a skills hub focused on the construction stroke retrofit sector. Recommendation 2 is to delegate to the Director of Place, in consultation with the portfolio holder for economic development, the signing of contracts, agreements and procurement requirements associated with the delivery of this proposal, subject to appropriate legal and procurement advice. And number 3, to delegate to the Assistant Director for Economic Growth, in consultation with the portfolio holder for economic development, to make any non-substantive changes to the work programme to ensure delivery within the required timelines. Are we all content with those? Lovely. Okay, thank you very much. It's quite exciting, I think, that one. Okay then, so let's move on to item 11, which you'll find on page 196, and that's Sean is going to give us this report, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. This paper is seeking Cabinet approval to agree a contract award for the hybrid mail provision for Broadland District Council on a 3-year plus 1 year plus 1 year basis, so that's a 3-year plus an option to extend a further 2 years. The driver for this paper was to bring the provision for the hybrid mail within a contract, and also to unlock some savings. It was a joint tender covering both Broadland and South Norfolk councils to ensure that we delivered best value for money that offering out a larger contract would bring. Based on current usage at the moment, the contract will deliver just over £82,000 worth of savings over the 5 years. And in year 1, that's a £13,000 saving, and then £17,000 for the further years 2 through to 5. The difference is because in the first year it doesn't include the annual billing runs, the council tax, waste services annual billing runs. They come into the contract from year 2, and the reason we did that is because we didn't want to disrupt the annual billing runs in year 1. So we took it out of the contract, so that will continue with the provider. We've proposed a start date for the 1st of April for this contract to ensure a smooth implementation between contract award, which, if we get approval today, will be on the 14th of December, gives us an implementation period to work with the incoming contractor and supplier, and it will also avoids the implementation of the new revs and benefits system, which is going in at the moment, so we didn't want to disrupt that. Happy to take any questions.
It's not a question, it's an endorsement from me that if only all decisions were this easy, in that we're presented with a paper which reduces operational risk, potentially increases efficiency, and will save us over £80,000. That's a triple win, isn't it? So absolutely endorse.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I raised the question to you at informal. My only concern was about continuity for people having benefits letters and things like that, and you completely reassured me about any concerns with your test runs and all the rest of it. So I'm fully on board. As Dan said, what's not to like with it? It's great. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we're all pretty much agreed that this is an absolutely common sense move. I think makes perfect sense not to include this year's billing, doesn't it? Because that could cause a bit of a mess if we're not careful. But yes, I think absolutely. And as far as I'm aware, that we are looking at the same provider that we're currently using, so actually should be relatively seamless, we hope. Yes. So I'm more than happy to go with that. So I'm guessing everybody else's, but I will just read the recommendation to you. It is agreed to award a 3-year contract with the option to extend by 2 years for the hybrid mail provision for Broadland District Council to supplier A. Are we all happy with that? Thank you. Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, so if I move us to item 12, which is the forward plan, it is attached to your documents at page 201. I don't really think there's anything much to comment on there. It is what it is, unless anybody's got anything pressing that they think they want to draw our attention to in advance. But otherwise, we just accept that this is the forward plan as it stands, and we move forward with that. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much then. Thank you very much for coming, everybody. I think that's quite a set of productive reports there. So thank you all. I close the meeting.